Turning now to some other news, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has confirmed that Ukrainian troops are fighting in Russia's Belgorod region. Now, a reminder that Belgorod is close to Russia's Kursk region, where Ukrainian troops have been trying to hold on to territory since a surprise incursion last year. Zelenskyy has said that the move into Kursk and other Russian territory aims to divert Russian forces from Ukraine. Ukraine's military has released drone footage of what it says are attacks on Russian troops in Belgorod. And Zelensky's announcement comes after Russian reports of Ukrainian attacks in Belgorod last month.
Chief of Defense Oleksandr Syrskyi has reported on the front line our presence in the Kursk region and our presence in the Belgorod region. We are continuing our active operations in the enemy's border areas, and this is absolutely justified. The war must return to where it came from.
Meanwhile, Russia is on a major recruitment drive, the largest draft since its war against Georgia. Rights groups fear that the government might force many of these conscripts to sign military contracts, which would mean that they could be sent to fight. All of this comes just ahead of an expected new offensive in Ukraine. DW's Sergei Satanovsky reports.
An unexpected early end to a workout session in a Moscow gym.
The police are here. They just forced us to the ground. We're lying face down right now. Non-Russians over there, Russians over here. The order is some go one way, the rest go the other.
Eyewitnesses told local media the officers were looking for men of conscription age. This decree from President Vladimir Putin has launched the biggest military draft for the last 14 years. The state is now calling up 160,000 men. Last year, the number was 150,000. The Russian military draft always happens twice a year. But this spring, it's different. Not only the government calling up more men, it may punish those who ignore their call-up with a range of administrative restrictions. Civil rights groups say they'll be monitoring to see if that happens.
We'll know the new law is in effect if there's a wave of people being denied loans, barred from registering or closing small businesses, or are unable to buy or sell property and vehicles as a result of the draft. If people are stopped at passport control or banned from leaving the country, that will also be a clear sign.
The Russian parliament, the Duma, tightened conscription laws when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began 3 years ago. Back then, lawmakers said it was for self-defense.
Within a year, we must provide military training, so we'll have a mobilization reserve. If there's a major war against Russia, it's fully justified.
Today's drafted men won't automatically be sent to the front. But rights groups say they may end up pressured to sign a military service contract, and that would mean they could be sent to fight.
Previously, a 3-month training period was required before signing a military service contract. Now, however, a contract can be presented right at the enlistment office. As a result, a huge number of people have signed contracts without fully realizing it. Secondly, and this has already been acknowledged by the authorities, in some cases, commanders are signing contracts on behalf of conscripts.
All of this is happening as the Ukraine government is warning of a major Russian offensive later this spring. This would add to an already high death toll.
At least 200,000 men of conscription age have been killed in Ukraine, and at least 500,000 have been maimed. And the fighting must go on. Taking that into account, apparently Russia is preparing for a major offensive close to May, when the ground will have dried up, so it needs manpower.
Surveys of Russian voters show about 80% support their army's actions. Although it should be noted that speaking against the army is a crime in Russia, people have been jailed for more than 7 years for doing so. Even though most people wouldn't want their loved ones to fight, Most observers see the continuing war working in Putin's favor domestically.
The war acts like a drug, and this is how it works. War is sacred, it must not be lost. We have to tighten our belts, grit our teeth, and fight back against the entire West that has attacked us.
Amid discussions of a potential ceasefire in Ukraine, the Kremlin's counterparts might want to keep an eye on Putin's draft and what's unfolding in Moscow gyms.
And for more on Russia's recruitment drive, we can turn now to Valentyn Nalyvaichenko. He's the former head of the security service of Ukraine and an MP for the All-Ukrainian Union Fatherland party, and he joins us from Kyiv. Welcome. The biggest conscription campaign in over a decade is now underway in Russia as Putin expands his military. The official line is that they won't be sent to fight in Ukraine. But what do you think this will mean for Ukraine, both in the short and the long term?
We still experience the expansion of Russian aggression. We do see that Putin, his regime, is expanding all the human forces against Ukraine, trying to occupy more land and trying to use as much as they could, even they are keeping up of shelling civilian cities, of using missiles against civilian cities of Ukraine. The last Friday, we lost 20 people dead in Kyiv, including 9 children, because of this expansion of Putin and his aggression, and using again against us all forces he could and can.
And do you think by recruiting additional manpower that this could have long-term impacts on the battlefield in Ukraine?
Yeah, we're sure that Russia government and Putin will send them, young people of Russian young people, to fight against Ukraine. There is no other goal for his recruitments. There is no other goal so far for his policy and for his absolutely unjustified war against Ukraine.
Now, I also want to ask you about Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's remarks. He said for the first time that Ukrainian troops are fighting in Russia's Belgorod region. Ukraine is, of course, also fighting in the Kursk region. How crucial do you see these efforts as in positioning for a potential Russian spring offensive?
The first and the most important goal for our military command to ease the pressure in East Ukraine, Donetsk region, Kyiv, where I mentioned to you, and that's why our, let's say, special operations, our, let's say, attacks on those border territories where Russia keeps the invaders, their troops are undergoing, and this is not a secret that in Kursk and Belgorod regions, our active operations of our military is undergoing. And the main goal is to, again, to expel, first of all, Russian aggressors, and again, to ease pressure at other, let's say, areas of the vast front line between Ukraine and Russia.
But in your view, does that ease the pressure? There are some analysts who've expressed concern that these kinds of cross-border incursions could actually drain resources from key battlefields elsewhere where they're needed along the front.
We trust our commanders. This is their decision. We fully support them when they protect our motherland, Ukraine. So we, I think, have to do all things possible to, again, to protect the country and to, by all means, stop the aggression.
Okay, let's take a look at efforts toward halting the fighter. The U.S. President Donald Trump, he said in the past few days that Ukraine and Russia were sort of close to a deal. How do you see the prospects for a meaningful halt in the fighting?
The main thing from us, from Ukraine, we confirm that we are ready, and we really acknowledge that we are ready for the full ceasefire along the front line, along the whole front line, entire front line between Ukraine and Russia. That's the first and the most important thing. Plus, we do rely on our partners, European partners, Germany, Great Britain, France, and others, to stay together to keep up together, to stop Russian aggression, to stop fighting, to cease fire, and then to start real negotiations how to really stop with Putin's aggression. And by the way, the only man, as we understand in this world, who still wants to conduct the aggression is Mr. Putin. That's why we need to stay together with Europe and with the United States as well. We do rely on this firm position. First, to cease fire.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today on DW News. That is Ukrainian MP Valentyn Nalyvaichenko.
Thank you.
DW correspondent Jan-Philipp Scholz has more on this for us from Kyiv. What do we know so far about the fighting in Belgorod?
Well, even though it's the first time that President Zelenskyy officially acknowledged the fighting in Russia's Belgorod region, there have been rumors about this for several weeks. In March, Russia said that it could successfully repel such an attack, but local military bloggers have been repeatedly stating that there has been fighting on the Russian side inside the Belgorod region, especially around the settlement of Demidovka, around 2 kilometers away from the border. Since then, also some international analysts have confirmed the fighting, but on a much smaller scale than what we have been seeing in Russia's Kursk region.
Does this change Ukraine's position in the conflict in any way?
Well, I think there are diplomatic and military objectives connected to the operation. On a diplomatic level, Ukraine might try to exchange Russian territory for Ukrainian territory in possible future peace negotiations. On a military level, it might try to force Russia to redeploy some troops from the Donbass, where Russia has been able to make some advances recently. And Ukraine might also try to slow down a possible future offensive on Kharkiv with this operation in Belgorod.
Meanwhile, Russia says its forces are continuing to make gains in northeastern Ukraine. How big is the fear of a Russian spring offensive where you are?
Well, there is some fear, and probably for good reasons. There have been heavy attacks on villages along the border on the Ukrainian side recently, and a lot of analysts say that these villages could be used as strongholds for possible further advances towards Kharkiv. The Ukrainian military says it's preparing for the worst, it's preparing for different scenarios, and President Zelenskyy has also said that it's obvious that there are preparations for a possible offensive in Kharkiv going on at the moment. You probably remember that it was almost exactly the same time of the year in 2024 that Russia tried to start a similar offensive in Kharkiv, which was only partly successful and eventually stalled. But people in the region are getting prepared for the worst.
And Jan-Philipp, where do you see the conflict now going as far as the stakes go here between Russia and Ukraine? Can you give us any more added information?
Well, here in Ukraine, people are not very hopeful when it comes to the possible state of peace negotiations. They see the repeated attacks from Russia. There are even people that say, ironically, whenever they hear about a future attack, okay, so these are the peace negotiations that we are seeing at the moment. So there is a lot of skepticism here in Kyiv and in all of Ukraine at the moment.
Okay, really appreciate you summing up things for us from Ukraine. Jan-Philipp Scholz there. Jan-Philipp Scholz there. Now let's take a closer look at what Russia could be planning in northeastern Ukraine.
Ukrainian troops drilling near the front line in the Kharkiv region in the northeast of the country. Soldiers say they hope for peace, but they say they also have to be ready in case the enemy attacks. It's here that Ukraine thinks Russia could be planning a new offensive as spring weather improves. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, speaking in Paris last month, said Russia was dragging its feet on ceasefire talks in order to seize as much land as possible before coming to the table.
Russia rejects a complete ceasefire. The message is clear. Russia wants the war to continue. It's dragging it out.
President Vladimir Putin, for his part, says Russia continues to make gains.
We're advancing, maybe not as quickly as some would like, but persistently nevertheless. We are confident that we are getting closer to achieving all the aims of our special military operation.
Russia's army currently occupies almost 20% of Ukraine's pre-war territory. Russia tried last year to make inroads along the northeastern front near Kyiv and the smaller city of Sumy. Ukraine's surprise counteroffensive in Russia's Kursk region forced the Kremlin to change its plans. Redrawing the map is one of the Kremlin's key demands at any future negotiations to end the war. And Putin may be thinking, the more land Russia can grab, the more Russia will be able to keep.